I have a theory that everyone hates me, and the evidence I'm making for this theory are the hot takes you all give me. Hello, everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and it's time for some Persona hot takes. I'm about to beat episode Aigis on stream, and before I enter that depressive episode, get it? I think we need to sit back, relax, and have a few laughs. I asked you all to give me your hottest, spiciest takes for Persona. Oh boy, did you all deliver. Oh boy, did you all deliver. And some of you have some really good ideas, actually, so we're going to get into it today. And we're just going to rip the band-aid off, yeah? Buckle your seatbelts, strap yourselves in, prepare for turbulence. The first take of the day goes to @Meatbug8611, who says, all the Persona stories are mid! Like, things are just said, but not going in depth, and you are just supposed to roll with it. I mean, what is Aigis? How does she work? Artificial persona? I mean, come on, that's just dumb. I thought that only raw human emotion can trigger persona. Also, it isn't explained why Takaya can use persona without evoker. Now, personally, to put it mildly, I disagree here. Persona has some of my favorite narratives of any game out there, but I can understand where they're coming from. Because, like, at the end of the day, people are receptive to different things, and they look for different things out of the stories that they consume. Some people hyperfixate on the details, and they want a well-constructed narrative where every little detail and plot thread are carefully interwoven with each other. Me personally, I do value those elements. However, I am willing to forgive certain elements and let things be unexplained if the overall product is entertaining or engaging enough. And Persona for me is one of those IP, one of those stories that deliberately doesn't go into detail overtly, that way it can leave some things to interpretation, and also that vagueness can be kind of the point on occasion. This person brought up Aigis, but there's a couple of people that I could also bring up in regards to this overall phenomenon. Namely, Aigis, Koamaru, Teddy, and you can argue Morgana. But the ones I normally talk about, or at least think about in regards to this issue, are Aigis and Teddy. Because the plot surrounding them is essentially that over the course of the game, they develop, in essence, a human soul. And because they develop this human soul, they can also manifest a persona. Aigis could do this before because she was directly developed by the Kirjo group to be an anti-shadow weapon. So I imagine one of those scientists knew something that allowed them to maybe artificially implant a persona within Aigis, and then eventually she made it her own, especially when it upgraded to Athena in the base game. Or there was always something a little special about Aigis specifically. Well, I also guess Metis, technically. This point was especially dug into when it came to Persona 4 with Teddy. He didn't have his persona originally, but he did come from the realm of the TV with all the shadows. And over the course of the game, he becomes more and more human, even developing a human body and a human form, and at numerous points throughout the game has these kind of critical thresholds where he becomes more human. So for me, like, yeah, generally we view personas to be triggered by human emotion, but it's not exclusive. Koamaru's not a human, but has human-like emotions in regards to his previous master and his sense of duty to protect the shrine. Morgana is a being from the metaverse, and I think the underlying main message of the game, when it comes to Persona, is that in this world, it doesn't matter if you're a person, you can still develop a soul. You're not necessarily, it's not just the fact that you may be born with one, you can develop one. And this is a recurring instance in Persona, and it borderline feels as if it's trying to build to something later on, almost like they want to make a game down the line that pushes the overall series plot forward significantly. When it comes to Takaya not using the evoker, it's kind of established that the reason they have to use the evoker, at least my understanding, is that by using the evoker, it is the best way to make these characters feel on the verge of death, and that feeling is what is needed in P3 to summon your persona. Takaya essentially worshipping Nyx and worshipping death, I imagine, is enough to fulfill that criteria so he can just summon it, albeit in a slightly different way because he was one of those artificially implanted ones, which now that I think about it, is a point that actually is brought up in P3, so they could have easily done that with Aigis. But yeah, I think the main point here is not necessarily to get bogged down in like the specifics of these examples and how feasible they are per se. I think there's an overall discussion though that is really interesting about where we all draw the line, because once we don't enjoy something, it can be really easy to spot things that we don't like about something. Almost as if a spotlight is being shown on those elements specifically. Whereas if you enjoy a piece of media, you may be forgiving, or you can just simply look over something because you're engaged enough with the project to be engaged and entertained. Oh, now we have one in regards to episode Aigis and the answer overall, and this has been a hot topic in the community, so let's talk about it. We have at Leo C through 6147 who says, if you think Yukari's portrayal in the answer / episode Aigis ruins her character, then I'm sorry to tell you, but you might not have the best reading comprehension. If you don't like it for any other reason than that, that's fine. You don't need to like it. Yes, Yukari in episode Aigis is one of those points of conversation that have been around since the original answer, back in the days of Fez. I never played the original answer, and I've only seen like highlights of it, but I am familiar with overall what happens, even if I haven't beaten it fully myself. I'm in like literally the last door, and I've experienced a lot of it in episode Aigis as of now. I like Yukari's portrayal, and I'll be a Yukari defender here, and even what I recall from the original answer, for a very specific reason. We're gonna need to get into spoilers, which I probably put at the top of this video anyway, so screw it. When it comes to Persona 3, it is a breakdown about how humans react to and how we perceive death. Now, that could be in regard to the death of a body, the death of a person, or even the death of a dream. And Persona 3 tackles that idea and that concept from a lot of different angles. Characters preparing for death, reacting to death actively and in the present, or coping with death that happened in the past. It's a very common thing in Persona 3, and it kind of is the DNA of Persona 3. When it comes to the end of the game, though, that is when the theme really comes to a head. And then we have the end of the game where the theme comes to a head, where you dealt with everyone else dealing with death, understanding death, coping with death. The finale of the game is, okay, now it's your turn. You are on deck. It's time for you to die. And it's sad, but it's beautiful because you maximized the life you had available to you, which is kind of the theme of the game. And then you have episode Aigis coming in, and it's the video game equivalent of being a ghost watching your own funeral. You're watching everyone else essentially react to you dying. And the criticisms that people levy at episode Aigis in regards to this namely fall on two shoulders, Aigis and Yukari, namely Yukari. And the reasoning that these people have is that they already went through this development in the base game. They already learned these lessons. We shouldn't have to rehash these things in episode Aigis. I can kind of see where they're coming from. My retort would be that death is never easy, and you can understand it. Heck, you can even prepare for it all you want, but it can still come at you hard and fast and unexpectedly. No one expected Makoto to die at the end of the game here, or at least in the way he did. If he was going to die, they thought he was going to die in the final battle, not like a month afterwards. And the death of someone that important to all of them just impacted them in different ways. Aigis chose to basically almost abandon her humanity. And I'll get into Aigis in a future video, almost certainly, when I do my final impressions of episode Aigis. But let's talk about Yukari here, because Yukari is essentially showcasing someone who runs away from the pain. She doesn't want to be there. Everything involving Seas, involving the dormitory, involving Tartarus, and now the Abyss of Time reminds her of that pain, reminds her of Makoto. So some people may say she acts like a jerk to everyone in the original answer, or that she's just weirdly distant and all that, and she should have learned these lessons in the base game. It's not a matter of learning these lessons, because, like I said, you can prepare for this all you want. Sometimes, though, it's still a gut punch, and people react to this stimulus of death in different ways. Their coping mechanisms are simply different. So while some people say it's a retread of a theme that's already been done, I would argue 2, it's honestly a really human moment and a really human characterization for Aigis, but also Yukari. But who's the man? We have at Dylan versus Comics 8138, who says, hot take, Junpei is a top 2 Persona character, and I'm tired of pretending like he's not. Now, I wouldn't put him in my top 2 personally. My top 3 go like Aigis and Elizabeth neck and neck, but then Kanji. But here's the thing with Junpei. Good God, has he grown on me. I always thought he was aight, but I was never particularly fond of him, and then with Reload, with those cutscenes and that story with Chidori, and I finally managed to actually save her, yeah. When I'm looking at all the Persona characters, I think Junpei's story is arguably one of my favorites. That entire narrative with Chidori, and if you do manage to bring her back, his reaction to that, good God, is it just twisting a knife in the heart, you know? It's really well executed, and I think both voice actors for Junpei do a really good job, but I'm particularly fond of the Reload Junpei. Mainly because Reload is where I fell in love with Persona 3. And I think Junpei's a big reason for that. His story works so damn well for the theme of the game. Dealing with death and that grim specter, but also maximizing the life that we have, even if it's not all that much. But for him, it's not just a matter of maximizing his own life and living it to the fullest. For a period of time there, he sets out to live not just for himself, but also for Chidori, and that's a really sweet narrative arc. And some people may say bringing her back ruins the story. I'd argue otherwise. In fact, I think it makes it even better. The old Chidori is pretty much dead. All those grim memories in the past, and now she can live her own life and Junpei can live his. It's a very sweet ending in a game that doesn't have a lot of those. So yeah, now I'm fully Team Junpei, by the way. Yeah. I gotta defend my boy. And now we have at Potato Archer 3985 who says, honestly, I think P4 had the lamest dungeons. They're too linear, and while that alone isn't necessarily a bad thing, there's plenty of explorability in Inaba, and given how P5 Royal Dungeons had a lot of puzzles, side rooms, and collectibles, it made it more interesting to explore, and it made each dungeon have a different vibe, while the rooms in the dungeons of P4 all felt the same. Every dungeon felt the same, but with a new texture pack. I can let Tartarus slide because I can't expect the developers to make 250 rooms in the same tower all feel unique, but I can't feel that way for P4s. Also, Yukari is better than Aigis. Yeah, I said it, don't at me. Okay, that blaspheme at the end aside. I used to think Tartarus was my least favorite dungeon in all of Persona. I think now P4's is my least favorite for a very simple reason. I don't have to grind all that much in Tartarus anymore because of how Reload did side quests, but because of how P4 does side quests, there's a lot of grinding involved, so I'm staying in these very linear dungeons without much in the way of unique gameplay, except every now and then, and I think they're more of a slog than anything. I'm still not a fan of Tartarus. I agree, I think P5's dungeons are better. I prefer the variants both in terms of visuals, but also in floor layouts and having additional puzzles and stuff. It doesn't need to be much, it just needs to be something to keep me interested, to make these dungeons feel different to one another, and I think P4 suffers from that. I think the best dungeon in P4 is probably Heaven, and that's just because the theme of that dungeon alongside, good God, the song. Look, I have a massive soft spot for P4, more so than P3 and P5, but it's not because of the dungeons. Though I do love the combat. We've talked about it before, but if we ever do get a Persona 4 remake, like Persona 4 Rewind or whatever they want to call it, if we could just get revamped dungeons, that would go so far for me. Yeah, Persona 4 till the day I die. Or at this point, is it till the day I Persona 3? Something to think about. And we have one final take on the chopping block of this evening. We have at Jupe Van Hedel 1372 who says a Striker spin-off for P3 and 4 would be amazing because they do that Elizabeth story, or they could do that Elizabeth story, and give Aigis a happy ending. Just like P3 and 5 Dancing, they can also do that for Strikers, only this time it is for Persona's most popular spin-off, so it could be a great success. Side note, I think if we get that game, that Atlas is going to go for the less good ending by giving Makoto his body back, because they want to give Aigis a happy ending because Aigis is so popular, and because of marketing and merchandise reasons. What about the one hand is a shame because the original game's ending dies because of this, but on the other hand, again, Aigis gets a happy ending because of this. Yeah, it's an interesting interesting point of contention, because I think the Persona 3 base ending is absolutely beautiful and works so well with the theme of the game, and you don't really want to compromise that. So if you're going to go in the route of saying bring Makoto back somehow to give Aigis a happy ending, I think it can work, but it's so heavily reliant on the way that it's told and the theme of the game in what it's told. P3 is all about death, so I think this would only really work in a game that's all about life, where the theme is to live, to fight for what you want, to fight for what you believe in. These are themes that Persona has tackled in the past, but if we got a Persona game that's similar to 3 in the way that 3 deals with death, but in a game that deals with life, like the flip side of P3, I think it could work there. But good God, you would have to nail the landing. There couldn't be any mess-ups, in my opinion. I never liked the whole door thing, so I'd be kind of interested to see what they could do with this. So to me, I'd be willing to hear them out, mostly because I already view the ending of P3 to be kind of compromised because of the answer/episode, I guess, and the whole door thing. So personally, it wouldn't upset me that much, though if you don't mind that element, I can understand why people would be really hesitant to see this story happen, though they have teased it with Persona 4 Arena, with Elizabeth trying to find a way to bring him back. I don't know, personally I just want to really see how they would do it. I'm so morbidly curious, you know? But hey, maybe time will tell. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.